The morning this all really exploded, I walked out on my porch with a mug of coffee, expecting to see my herd scattered across a quiet pasture like they always are, and instead I saw what looked like a low-budget music festival smeared across my land, a sea of tents and RVs and smoke from a dozen campfires rolling over grass my family has grazed for 3 generations, and right in the middle of it, standing on a plastic table with a megaphone like some outlaw mayor, was Janet Holloway, president of the Willow Creek Heights HOA, yelling, "Welcome to the Freedom Campout," like she owned the zip code. I'm Cole Harding, 3rd-generation rancher out in Mesa Ridge County, and that green space everyone was stomping on is Harding Ranch, 200 acres of deeded pasture and barbed wire that my grandfather stretched by hand, a place where the only crowds I ever planned on were cattle and coyotes, not 500 weekend warriors in matching camp chairs. On the east side of my place, pressed right up against my fence, sits Willow Creek Heights, all vinyl siding and matching mailboxes, and people who pay a few hundred a month so the Willow Creek Heights HOA can decide what color their shutters are, and for the last few years their self-crowned queen has been Janet. Wide-brimmed hat, clipboard, that permanent smile that says she's never been told no and believed it. She hated my ranch from the day she moved in, said my old fence ruined the aesthetic, called my bulls a liability and an eyesore, started stuffing my mailbox with HOA letters about unauthorized vegetation and livestock noise, like grass and cows were some shocking new invention, and I laughed at first because my deed predates their subdivision by 40 years and I never signed a thing with their name on it. But then they paved a community trail right along my fence and started calling my pasture the Greenbelt in their brochures, and Janet strutted that trail, telling joggers she was working with the rancher to open the land for community events, never once knocking on my door, just talking like silence was permission. So when a flyer landed in my mailbox, full color, big fonts, Willow Creek Freedom Campout, music, food trucks, bonfires, camping on the community Greenbelt, all weekend, I knew exactly what she meant by Greenbelt. I took my survey map down to the little HOA office, laid it on a folding table, traced the line with my finger. "This," I said, "is my fence, this is my deed, this is Harding Ranch. You step 1 tent across this line, you're trespassing." Janet didn't even look down, just scratched something on her clipboard. "The maps we've seen show it as shared space," she said. Voice sugar sweet. "The community deserves to enjoy nature. Mr. Harding, don't be selfish, we'll clean up." Selfish. That's what she called it when someone told her no. I went home, checked every post, made sure no trespassing, livestock pasture signs were nailed up, so often it felt like overkill, and told myself maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't be crazy enough to do it. By Friday afternoon, my road was packed with lifted trucks and campers, neon vests at the end of my own driveway, and as I rolled up, one kid in a Willow Creek security badge waved me down like I was a lost tourist. "Sorry, sir, campground's full," he said. "You'll have to park somewhere else." "Son," I told him, "you are standing in my driveway." Behind him, they were already tearing down my signs for souvenirs, digging fire pits into my grass, kids running across my pasture like it was a county fair, and on that table, megaphone in hand, Janet Holloway was calling my land our Greenbelt to a cheering crowd. I could have lost it. Instead, I pulled out my phone, hit record, filmed every torn sign and tent stake past the fence, called the sheriff, and took a slow breath. Because if she wanted to play with laws and lines, I had sharper tools than a megaphone. Sheriff Dan Morales rolled in about an hour later, easing his cruiser between coolers and lawn chairs, looking like a man who knew this was going to ruin his evening. I met him at the gate, handed him a copy of my deed, pointed at my posted signs, then at 500 strangers on my pasture. "Looks pretty simple from my side," I said. "This is private, posted land. Nobody asked. Nobody has permission." Janet hustled over with a stack of HOA papers, voice booming through the megaphone. As she told him this was a civil dispute over community green space, and that the HOA had every right to host events. He skimmed her documents, looked at my deed again, and gave me that tired lawman look. "Cole, line's on your side, no doubt," he said, "but we're in civil versus criminal territory here. I can't drag 500 people off without a court order and a real safety issue. You want them gone for good. You're looking at judges and lawyers. The campers cheered like it was a verdict. Janet smirked, and for a second I felt that old, hot urge to scream, to start tearing down, tense myself. Then my eyes drifted past the mess to the far end of the pasture, where 24 black bulls grazed in the heat, calm as Sunday mornings, and something in me settled. Fine, I thought, we'll do this the slow way. That night, while music thumped and generators rattled outside, I sat at my kitchen table under a single lamp, flipping through my father's old binder, survey. Maps of Harding Ranch, notes on water rights, copies of county open-range laws and livestock statutes he'd underlined in red, and there it was in black and white. This is cattle country. If you lawfully move your herd on your own land, and someone chooses to be in the way, that's on them. So I wrote a livestock movement notice, real formal, filed it with Sheriff Morales, the county clerk, and animal control. At noon tomorrow, bulls moving from north pasture to south, along the traditional trail that now happened to run through the middle of Janet's campout, and I printed a copy for the Willow Creek Heights HOA, taped one to their office door, and another right on Janet's shiny SUV at the trailhead. Next stop was town, to see Elliot Brooks, a local attorney, who still owed me for pulling his truck out of a frozen ditch one winter. I dropped the photos and the notice on his desk. He flipped through, eyebrows climbing. "You've got them dead to rights," he said. "Trespass, nuisance, fire hazards, dumping, and with this livestock notice, you're not just right, you're careful. Move your bulls slow, keep it controlled, keep the cameras rolling, and let them panic themselves." Back at the ranch, I called in two brothers from down the road, Nate and Eli Turner, good hands who knew my herd. We walked the bulls that evening, checked hoofs, topped off water, rattled feed buckets so they remembered the routine. 24 head, black, heavy, horns catching the last light. They look like danger to anyone who doesn't understand them. But to us they were steady as tractors, trained to my whistle and the Turner staffs. I set cones along the north gate, tied bright ribbons along the cattle trail, parked my tractor in plain view, and let the trail cameras soak up hours of footage. Campers cutting my fence for better access, kids climbing posts, gray water from RVs dumping into my grass, fire pits dug inches from dry weeds. Before bed, I called the sheriff's office again, left a calm message. "Just reminding you, Sheriff, bulls move at noon, all paperwork's in, didn't want anyone surprised." At 11:55 the next day, the sun high and mean, I stood at the north gate with Nate and Eli, bulls lined up behind us, the camp already buzzing with rumors. Some folks laughed it off, called them big puppies. Others looked nervous, glancing from their tents to the horns on the horizon. Janet marched around assuring everyone, "He won't dare. The HOA will sue him into the ground." She must not have seen the notice with her name on it. When the clock hit 12, I wrapped my hand around the latch, felt 20 years of swallowing my anger at people like her, and let it all condense into one simple motion. I opened the gate. The bulls stepped out not like a stampede, but like a slow, black river, hooves thudding, dust curling around them, horns gleaming, snorts carrying through the heat. To a rancher, it was just a regular drive. To 500 suburban campers clutching beer cans and selfie sticks, it looked like the end times. At first, phones went up, people cheering, filming. Then one younger bull kicked his heels, tossed dirt for fun, and the mood flipped. Someone screamed, a tent collapsed, kids cried, RVs tried to turn in space meant for tractors, a food truck peeled out throwing queso and folding chairs behind it. An overhead drone streamed every second to whoever was bored enough online. Right in the middle of it, Sheriff Morales's cruiser rolled up. He stepped out, took one long look at the bulls moving in formation and the campers running like they'd never seen livestock before, and just shook his head. Janet sprinted toward him, megaphone shrieking, "Arrest him." He released wild animals on innocent families. He glanced at the bulls, at my notice in his hand, and said, "Ma'am, those are domesticated cattle on Harding Ranch. Moving on a documented schedule. You brought people into a working pasture. That's not a crime on his part, that's a decision on yours." We kept the bulls between the cones and ribbons. Nate and Eli guiding stragglers with quiet whistles, never pushing, never rushing. One big boy brushed a luxury golf cart parked half over my line and folded the side like a soda can. the alarm wailing, and the crowd lost its mind, but not a single person was touched. By the time the last bull stepped through the south gate and I dropped the chain in place, the so-called freedom campout was a battlefield of abandoned coolers, torn tents, spinning tires, and one HOA president standing alone in the wreckage, hat crooked, mascara streaked, shouting through a dead megaphone that she was going to have my ranch condemned. I just whistled for the bulls, patted the nearest flank, and walked back to the house, because the real fight had never been in that pasture. It was headed for a courtroom, and I was the only one walking into it with my hands clean and my homework done. 2 days later, a fat envelope showed up, Willow Creek Heights HOA and President Janet Holloway suing for reckless endangerment, emotional trauma, and livestock intimidation, demanding an emergency order to stop me moving cattle across community property and enough money to fix every dented toy in that camp. I took it straight to Elliot Brooks. He skimmed it, smirked, and said, "She brought a megaphone to a paper fight." Because while Janet was out giving speeches, I'd been collecting everything: trail cam clips of campers cutting wire and ripping signs, drone footage of trash and gray water leaking into my pasture, county citations for unpermitted fires, and food trucks with no health permits, Sheriff Morales' reports stating my drive was lawful, notices stamped and filed before a single bull moved. County inspectors backed it up, fire marshal, environmental officer, public health, all of them writing up the HOA, not me. The insurance company for Willow Creek Heights HOA froze event coverage. Dues notices went up. Neighbors started asking, "Why am I paying for her stunt?" While they scrambled to plug holes, Elliot filed our counterpunch: trespass, nuisance, property damage, environmental harm, legal fees, every point stapled to a photo, a timestamp, a report. And tucked into the back was one more quiet card: a couple of tax liens I'd bought on delinquent HOA common areas, including that precious strip they kept calling Greenbelt. In court, Janet came in hot, flanked by lawyers in sharp suits, still clinging to her clipboard like a life raft. They played shaky videos of bulls walking calmly past tents, narrated like a horror podcast, painted me as some rogue cowboy using feral animals to terrorize families. Then Elliot stood up and, in a voice barely above conversation, walked the judge through the actual story: old maps showing the ranch line, copies of my deed and grazing rights, open-range statutes, the livestock movement notice filed with the county, Sheriff Morales confirming everything, inspectors' reports citing the HOA for fires, dumping, and illegal vendors, video of trespassers tearing down my signs, photos of my cones and ribbons marking the bull trail, and finally, those lien documents that proved the HOA president had been treating land she didn't fully control like her personal playground. The judge didn't need long. He threw out Janet's injunction, called her claims overstated and unsupported, upheld my right to run cattle on Harding Ranch, and ordered Willow Creek Heights HOA to pay damages to me: fence repairs, pasture restoration, cleanup, attorney's fees, and to cover the county fines their freedom campout had racked up. Back in Willow Creek, the fallout was quick and ugly. Dues went up again, tempers snapped in board meetings, and at the next one, neighbors showed up with copies of the ruling, with pictures of their ruined yards from all the festival parking, with bills from fines passed straight to them. By the end of the night, Janet Holloway wasn't president anymore. She was just a woman being escorted out of a room full of people who used to clap for her. Within a month, her house had a for sale sign, and then she was gone, taking her megaphone and her version of freedom somewhere else. The new board, led by Mark Ellis, came out to the ranch one evening, hats in hands, and said, "We're done fighting you, Mr. Harding, we're sorry. Tell us what needs fixing." So they paid the crews that hauled every last trash bag off my land. They bought posts and wire to help me rebuild the worst sections of fence. They funded soil tests and reseeding where the ruts were deepest. The judge even tied a small scholarship program to the settlement. HOA money helping local kids learn ranching and land stewardship, which felt like the land itself getting the last word. One night, when the dust had finally settled, I walked that east fence, new wire humming tight under my palm. Bulls grazing in the distance, no tents, no bonfires, just crickets and the low murmur of cattle. and I realized I wasn't angry anymore, just tired and grateful that I'd chosen the hard road. Notices instead of fists, bulls on schedule instead of chaos, courtrooms instead of revenge fantasies. Willow Creek Heights is still there, neat lawns and porch lights glowing behind my trees. But now there's a clear line in their paperwork, in their bank account, and in their memories that says, Harding Ranch is not your greenbelt. It is not your campground. It is not your stage. And that's really what this whole story comes down to: boundaries. Not just in barbed wire and survey maps, but in life. People like Janet will always dress their wants up as community or freedom and expect you to hand over what's yours with a smile, and sooner or later you have to decide how you're going to answer that. So I'll leave you with this. When someone decides your land, your time, your peace is just shared space for their plans, how far should you go to defend your boundaries? Is what I did, notices, bulls, court, simply fair and necessary? Or, if you were camping out there, would you say I crossed a moral line even while staying inside the legal one?